We will now take up Senate Bill 63. Senator Pavlov.
Thank you, Chairman Jones, and good morning, committee members. I appreciate you taking under consideration Senate Bill 63, a bill that would establish the Michigan Firearms Freedom Act in our state. This is a very important piece of legislation. I began my work on protecting Second Amendment rights back in 2009 as a House member by introducing the very same piece of legislation. At that time, we weren't able to get a committee hearing, so it's kind of been a long time in the process. To bring the committee up to speed of what is in the bill and what isn't in the bill, I would just like to start out by saying the Michigan Firearms Freedom Act would exempt from federal law and regulations any personal firearm, firearm accessory, or ammunition that is made in Michigan and remains within Michigan's borders. The rationale is that the 9th and 10th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution grant states the ability to regulate intra-state commerce. Because these goods have not traveled interstate, they are therefore not subject to federal regulations. What we're seeing out of Washington over the last several weeks is a reaction to a tragedy that is being leveraged in a way that is putting the Second Amendment rights of everybody, not only in Michigan but in the United States, under great concern. And what we're seeing happen is a steady eroding of our rights under the Second Amendment. If you look at the 23 executive recommendations that came out, we are now requiring doctors to be asking questions under the Affordable Health Care Act of patients. What we're saying with this bill is let the state of Michigan and our citizens and our rulemaking ability determine what's important for our gun owners. Firearms accessories that are manufactured within the state would not be subject to federal regulations. Firearms manufactured or sold in Michigan under the Act must be clearly identified and stamped as made in Michigan. Generic or insignificant parts imported into Michigan that also have other products that are not firearms related are also not subject to the law. What is not in this bill? This bill does not legalize fully automatic weapons. Fully automatic rifles were banned in the 1986 legislation Firearms Owners Protection Act, and that ban still applies. The bill specifically does not allow these kind of guns or ammunitions. Firearms that cannot be carried or used by one person. Firearms that have a bore diameter greater than 1.5 inches that use smokeless powder, not black powder, as a propellant. Ammunitions with projectiles that explode using explosions of chemical energy or as projectiles leave the firearm. Montana was the first state to adopt the Firearms Freedom Act in 2009. Soon after it was signed into law, U.S. Bureau of Alcohol and Tobacco and Firearm Explosives published an open letter to Montana. The AFT letter stated that because the Act conflicts with federal firearm laws and regulations, federal law supersedes the Act. A lawsuit was then filed in district court and was subsequently struck down. An appeal to the U.S. Court of Appeals is currently awaiting a hearing. Mr. Chairman, I ask that you take consideration of Senate Bill 63 to put Michigan in line with the other 8 states that have already approved this legislation and the 23 states that have introduced it and are considering this very important legislation across the country. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Senator. Do we have any questions? Senator Beda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, the sponsor, for bringing this forward. You know, I was interested in reading this, and then, you know, everything that's been happening in the last couple months. We've seen a lot of rhetoric on both sides of the issue, but just trying to break this bill down to what it actually does. There are 2 constitutional questions that seem to pop up right away. One of them is the supremacy clause of the federal government over the state government. The other issue is a commerce clause. And I'm an attorney, and I'm not going to propose that I'm an expert on constitutional law, but as I'm reading it, I think you've got a lot of problems in here, constitutional problems in here, that I suspect may not withstand judicial review. And it seems like it's a knee-jerk reaction to some things that are happening at the federal level that you want to go on record on and totally understand where
Sure.
you're coming from on that. But you know, the Constitution goes farther than one amendment of the Constitution, and we have to look at it all in an integrated part. And I just think this bill is maybe not quite ready for prime time yet. And but I do have those two questions. If you may, or perhaps somebody from LSB can specifically answer the issues regarding the Commerce Clause and the Supremacy Clause. And the other part of it, kind of related to the Commerce Clause, if you're going to manufacture something commercially and keep it within the borders of Michigan the whole time, I mean, how do you track something like that? It seems like you're creating a whole new registry or a whole new list. And just jumped out at me. That seemed like it was counterintuitive to something that you'd want to do.
Right. Having worked with you for several years, Senator Beat, I knew that you would be prepared. I knew that you were an attorney and that you would be well-versed in what we're trying to talk about here. And as you know, our three branches of the government, we do a lot of things in these rooms and in this Capitol that often land in the judicial branch of government where they finally make that decision. And this is probably a case that would land there. It wouldn't be the first time that we had passed a bill that had a constitutional challenge to it, and there are people much more intelligent on that issue to be able to determine it. As far as the regulation, what we're trying to say under the Commerce Clause and being able to deal with things that are sold within your state, our body, our legislative body and our Rules Committee should be able to do the regulations that the citizens of Michigan want on their firearms. And the intent of this is we never know what the next regulation coming from the federal government would be. There's a conversation about having to mandate registration of long guns. What happens when you start mandating registrations of shotguns? Then you have this whole other registry, and it's another impediment to the person that is going to use that gun in a lawful way. We just don't know what can come down. I feel very strongly that we have the right to regulate our firearms here and make sure that there isn't any additional burden to the people that want to lawfully own and enjoy their firearms, whether it's through hunting or target shooting. But as far as your question, other people will certainly weigh in on this. And there's another attorney that may speak after me.